Alex Kennedy covers the NBA, hoopshype.com. He joins us with a look at the NBA coming down the stretch. There's so many storylines here as we come down the final couple of weeks of the season. And it's really intriguing what's happening in the East. The East, all of a sudden, Alex, almost seems like it is more wide open all of a sudden than the West seemingly was. I know everybody thought Golden State was the favorite, but maybe that the West had some more entertaining matchups. All of a sudden, the East seems like it might be a little bit more wide open than we thought maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it's surprising. I think when you look at the top of the Eastern Conference, Cleveland obviously has struggled. Their defense has been, really poor for much of the season, but especially lately. Obviously, they've had some injuries, and this team isn't looking, unbeatable like they were for much of last season and entering this season. And then you have teams around the Cavaliers that are playing really well. The Boston Celtics are playing really good basketball. They obviously have gotten acclimated with Al Horford, his first full season there. Brad Stevens is a terrific coach. They're a team that I don't think anyone wants to face in a 7-game series just because they do have so many weapons, and Stevens is so good at what he does. And then you have a team like the Washington Wizards that's in the 3rd seed right now that really hasn't gotten much attention all year long. John Wall is putting up monster numbers. Bradley Beal's playing really well, and he's been healthy, which has been the big thing for him throughout his career. He's had some injuries. Otto Porter has really stepped up and become a 3-and-D guy. That's really helped them a lot. And Scott Brooks has done a great job there after that slow start. So, and then you talk about Toronto. They obviously made some additions at the trade deadline and shortly after to try to improve their team. Suddenly, it looks like, the Eastern Conference playoffs could be more interesting when I think for much of the year, everyone thought Cleveland would just walk right to the finals. So hopefully we get some competitive series. I'm not sure if we'll get many in the first round. I still think the first round is going to be pretty anticlimactic, but going forward, the second round and beyond, we could have some fun series.
Yeah. So are you legit concerned about Cleveland? I mean, is this a legitimate concern, or is this just them sleepwalking, almost maybe too much sleepwalking, but sleepwalking to the finish line here?
I am a bit concerned. I'm not as concerned as some people. I've seen some people saying that, they're going to lose in the second round or things like that. I don't think that's the case. I think this is a team that can flip the switch and play really good basketball at times. We've seen that in the past, not just with the Cavs either, but with other LeBron teams. In Miami, they were kind of known for coasting throughout the regular season, and then come playoff time, you get playoff LeBron, and the guys around him step up. So I'm not too concerned. I think come playoff time, they'll be okay. LeBron James obviously is going to take his game to another level. Kyrie Irving is such a special player. Kevin Love needs to get healthy. I think that's a big thing. But then I think the role players there will do well too. I think, sometimes the stars are the ones that can, remain mentally focused. And that's kind of what separates them from, the other players on the team. That's what separates the good players from the great players. A guy like Russell Westbrook or James Harden, let's say, they're playing hard every single night, no matter who the competition is. Whereas I think sometimes role players tend to coast or play up or down to the competition. Come playoff time, this Cavs team should be ready to go. The biggest concern for me is their defense, though. We haven't seen a team this, bad on defense win a championship since I want to say the Lakers, a long time ago, over a decade ago, I believe. So there's certainly concern there. If you can't slow another team down, you're going to have a lot of trouble, especially if they have to face the Golden State Warriors. Bad defense versus that Warriors offense equals a lot of problems for Cleveland.
Alex Kennedy, hoopshype.com. Boston, Washington, Toronto. Of those three, which team you like best?
I like Boston the best. I think they've done a really good job of putting together a team that can compete with Cleveland, and they have a number of different weapons that I like. Isaiah Thomas obviously was an all-star. He's putting up 30 points per game and playing really well. But I think, the other guys there have done an incredible job too. Jay Crowder is really underrated. He's one of the better perimeter defenders in the NBA, very efficient. Avery Bradley is another guy who's a top perimeter defender, and when he's healthy, he's played really well, and he's improved offensively. Al Horford was obviously their big offseason acquisition, and I think throughout the season there's been times where he looked uncomfortable and hasn't really adjusted as well. But now we're starting to see, he's helping them in the front court. And then Marcus Smart is another guy that's just a really good defender, a guy that is going to be a pest come playoff time. So I think a team like that has, perimeter defenders to throw at Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, that has a terrific coach in Brad Stevens that can make adjustments and is known for, coming up with great out-of-bounds plays and plays out of timeouts. That's a team that's pretty scary to me. Washington is up there too. I think they're very talented as well. I would say right now, Boston's probably 1A for me. Washington is 1B. And I think Toronto, just because they've struggled a bit, they've had some injuries, they've tried to get new guys acclimated, I think they're probably a notch below those two teams, but that's how I rank them right now. In Toronto also, they scare me a bit because they've had some issues in the playoffs when it comes to, shooting percentages from the field and three and free throw percentages. They haven't stepped up and played well on the biggest stage, where I think, guys like Isaiah Thomas and John Wall and some of those guys, they've played some of their best basketball in the playoffs, and that's what you want to see.
Alex Kennedy, so Atlanta, Milwaukee, Miami, Indiana, I guess Chicago's kind of in the mix still. Of those teams, who has the best chance of pulling off an upset?
I think it's Milwaukee. I think this team, just because they have so many mismatches, anytime you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, you're going to cause mismatches. When he's playing point guard at 6'11", maybe 7 foot now, who knows how much he's grown this year. It seems like he's always growing. But with his size and his length and his athleticism, he's just such a problem for other teams. He's on pace to become the first player or the fifth player in NBA history to lead a team in points, rebounds, steals, blocks, and assists. So he's really doing a good job this season, and I think it's been overlooked a little bit just because we've seen so much, great play from Westbrook and Harden, LeBron, and guys like that. But Giannis, at his young age, has been a monster. And then the guys around him have played well, too. Chris Middleton was injured earlier in the season, but he's come back and played pretty well. You have a number of role players there that, know their role. Guys like Malcolm Brogdon, who's a rookie. Michael Beasley has stepped up and played really well there. He's been much more efficient. The shooting percentages are much higher. So this is a team that, they're younger, but I think they're a team to watch. So I think, even though Atlanta, they have more experience and they're an older team, I just think Milwaukee's getting hot at the right time. I think they're better than their record indicates because of the injuries that they had throughout the year. And it's really hard for me to bet against Giannis in a 7-game series. You mentioned Brogdon. I want to get your thoughts on him in terms of Rookie of the Year. Most people think it's either Embiid if someone is going to give him the award for 31 games, Saric, so one of the Philly guys. But are you considering Malcolm Brogdon for Rookie of the Year? I'm not, to be honest with you. I think it comes down to Embiid or Saric. Honestly, I probably would lean toward Embiid. I know some people get angry about that because he didn't play enough games, but this year's rookie class was just so bad statistically. So you look at the numbers, and there's just such a huge gap between Embiid and everyone else when you talk about points and rebounds and, all of the relevant stats, PER. I mean, when he was out there, he looked like a star player, and there was no other rookie in this class that looked like that. All the guys that were picked near the top of the board really struggled throughout the year or were really inconsistent. So I think, Embiid could win it, actually, and I think that's a surprise to some people because of the lack of games. But if it's not Embiid, I think it has to be Saric. But it just kind of shows you that this draft class was really bad. When the guys that we're talking about as the best rookies were guys that were picked a few years ago and are just kind of rookies by technicality, it shows that this 2016 draft class was really weak. I think one of the weakest in recent memory. I did an article on it earlier this season, and I think there's fewer players averaging, double figures in scoring, fewer players averaging steals and rebounds. The numbers are across the board are just terrible. And that's why I think this Rookie of the Year race is kind of interesting, just because, there's no clear-cut guy after Embiid except for maybe Saric.
And that's an interesting point, though, you make, that the two leaders in the clubhouse, one played 31 games and has been injured. The other one, well, both of them really, were drafted in 2014 and are now the front runners to win this year's Rookie of the Year. That really is an interesting point of how bad this class was, that the two leaders in the clubhouse are two guys not even drafted in this class, and the third guy was a second-round pick.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there were a number of guys throughout this year that were undrafted that, shined as well, that got, some playing time and did well either on a playoff team or put up, significant numbers. So it was just a weird year. And it's funny, too, because entering the 2016 draft, there was some hype about this class. People were talking about it being a really good class. And certainly, the Ben Simmons injury affects everything. If Simmons is healthy, who knows what happens. It's hard to judge a class when the number 1 overall pick has been injured. But the guys that have played, the guys that we heard a whole lot about, like Jamal Murray and Buddy Hield and, these other guys, it's just interesting to me that really no one has stood out. And you have a guy like Hield who's already been traded. It's just a really weird year for rookies. But I think that one thing that we are seeing is this 2017 class looks to be loaded. And I think, anytime you have a really weak draft class like a 2016, typically the year that follows is pretty strong because guys, that could have came out in 2016 returned to school. And then this year it's just, there's so many one and done guys that seem like they could be special players, star players in the NBA, and a lot of point guards too. So that's very good for Philadelphia. They could find their point guard of the future in this 2017 draft. So this year's class has been very weak, but I am looking forward to seeing what next year's could do.
Alex, since you brought up Dario Saric, any concern that the Sixers burn him out in these last couple of games? I know he said the other night after the game that he was tired, and obviously with Embiid going down, they've really leaned on him to be their guy. He's played a lot of basketball throughout the calendar year.
Yeah, I'm never too concerned about it when it comes to young guys. The guys that I'm concerned about when it comes to wear and tear are typically the veteran guys. I look at a guy like LeBron James who's played just a ridiculous amount of minutes, or Kobe Bryant toward the end of his career when he would just refuse to come off the floor, and it obviously led to him declining quicker. But young guys, they get tired, but then they recover quickly. I'm not too concerned about it. I think there's stretches where a guy may be tired and worn down, but the recovery time is usually pretty quick, and I think it's good for him too. I think with Embiid down, you want to see what you have in Saric, and you want to lean on him because I think you want to see what kind of player he can become and how much potential he has, what his ceiling is. So it does make sense. I think, with Simmons and Embiid down, turn to Saric is what I would do. So I'm not too worried about him.
Did he exceed your expectations? What type of player do you think he can be for the Sixers in the future?
Yeah, he has exceeded my expectations. I remember covering that year's draft whenever the Sixers drafted Elfrid Payton and then traded for Saric. And I was surprised that Saric went as low as he did because I had talked to a number of executives that said, he would have been a much higher pick and was one of the more talented guys in the draft. But, there was concern about his overseas situation, when he'd come over. Obviously, Philadelphia was patient with him and it worked out. But, there's always that fear whenever there's a guy that is overseas and, you have to sign him. Obviously, I'm based in Orlando, so Magic fans look at a guy like Fran Vasquez, who never played for the Magic. They wasted a lottery pick on him. There's always concern there, and executives are always kind of, scared of those players. But certainly, getting him where they did in the draft worked out really well. And then watching him play now, he definitely has exceeded my expectations. I think he's further along than I expected. He's not someone that is raw and needs a lot of work. I think he's someone that can contribute sooner than later. And I just, I keep saying this. I feel like a broken record, but I just can't wait for this Philadelphia team to be completely healthy and see everyone together. We've kind of seen spurts of guys, individually and what they can do. But, I look at a guy like Ben Simmons and how he would impact Saric, how he would impact Embiid. I just really hope that we can see this team together because I think they would, all benefit from being on the floor together.
Alex Kennedy with us talking NBA basketball and Sixers basketball. And, yeah, you are based in Orlando, so you wrote at hoopshype.com about the guy he was traded for, Elfrid Payton. Who won that deal?
Well, it's tough to say. Elfrid's been very inconsistent throughout his career. I've gotten to know him very well, and I think he's put a lot of work in terms of improving his game. He's really tried to improve his jump shot, tried to become more consistent. And I think at this stage in his career, when you look at his game, he's a guy that's a triple-double threat every night. Since the All-Star break, he's almost averaging a triple-double. He's recorded 4 of them, and he's put up really good numbers. But the question with him has always been, is he just putting up numbers on a losing team? And then how much more potential does he have to grow? He was older than a lot of the guys in that draft class. So, unlike some of these kids that are 18 years old, 19 years old coming in, he had played in college for a few years. So you wonder how much more room there is for him to grow. But I think Payton is a really good player. I would say Philadelphia won that trade just because I think Saric, does have more potential. And I think, he has the ability to improve more and become a much better player. Whereas Payton, there's already been talk about, him being traded potentially. He's already been benched at times for, veterans like DJ Augustin and CJ Watson here in Orlando. So Payton's career hasn't gone as he, hoped it would, but he's finishing the season really strong. Anyone that's watched the Magic over the last month, well, first of all, I'm sorry for you. Your eyes probably hurt, but Payton's stats have been incredible, and he's done it on both ends of the floor too. That's one thing I like about him. Not only is he a guy that can, score at the rim, but he finds his teammates, and he's a really good defender. You talk to point guards around the NBA, and they just describe him as a pest because there's times where he's playing full court defense and has the energy to do it. And NBA players don't like when you do that against them. So there are certainly positives to Payton's game, and I'm curious to see how he continues to develop. But I think at this point, Saric is the better player.
Alex Kennedy's with us over at hoopshype.com. He wrote about what it's like to be traded in the middle of a season. Really great piece if you haven't checked that out. Hoopshype.com or Alex Kennedy NBA on Twitter. What are some of the things you found out? Because we talk to Mark Jackson every Thursday on the show, who has been all over the league. He's had all sorts of great injuries, stories that he's told us, and some of his stories are really, really interesting. But I'm interested to see what some guys told you about being traded and what stood out.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to those guys. First of all, a lot of these guys get blindsided by a deal. So they find out about it, and then, they basically have 24 hours, 48 hours to go report to their new team. And that's kind of just a crazy experience. And there's not many, jobs or situations where we can relate to that, where, all of a sudden your job says, okay, you have to go across the country in the next day or two and, learn to work with a new boss, new coworkers, in a new city, in a new system. It's a weird situation. So that's kind of why I wanted to write the article. But a lot of the off-court stuff really interested me. Like, guys get traded, and then, of course, they don't buy a home right away or buy an apartment. Typically, they're staying in a hotel for several months, and they're never really acclimated. So I know that's something that a lot of players talked about as, getting used to and having to kind of live out of a suitcase for a long time. And actually one situation was interesting. There were 2 players that had the same agent, and they got traded for each other, and they just swapped homes. So they actually lived in each other's house for the season because they didn't know what, the future held. So they lived in each other's house for the season, and then after the year, that's when they kind of made other arrangements. So there's interesting things like that throughout the article. And then I think the other big thing, too, was that a lot of these guys, when they're traded, they're excited about going to a new situation, but it's hard to just kind of flip a switch and then stop caring about your old team. Jamal Crawford mentioned that, he was looking forward to playing with the Knicks throughout that year, and he thought he and Zach Randolph could make an all-star team. Iman Shumpert probably said it best. He said that, the Cavs basically pulled him out of hell when they traded him from the Knicks. And he said he was ecstatic because he was on a contender, but he kept feeling bad for his old teammates, and he'd watch Knicks games and feel horrible that those guys were still stuck there. So there's definitely some interesting things that you don't think about just behind the scenes, on and off the court, for guys that get traded. And I think also just the learning curve too, having to learn new plays and new teammates, a new coach, all that stuff mid-season whenever you're joining a team that's already rolling and in sync. I think that's kind of difficult as well for some of these guys.
Yeah, check the article out at Alex Kennedy NBA, hoopshype.com. It's a really cool look and perspective of what it's like to be traded in season. Lastly, we saw the Warriors down 20 or 22, was it, and then come back and just blow the doors off the Spurs the other night. How discouraging was that for people who were looking for an intriguing series out of those two?
Yeah, it was discouraging. I think it was the best win of the season, in my opinion, because they were coming off a back-to-back after beating Houston and then playing San Antonio, and the Spurs gave it their all. They weren't resting players or anything like that. And then not having Kevin Durant as well just makes it even more impressive. So I thought it was a terrific win. I watched that game. Their defense is really what stood out to me. Obviously Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and David West were terrific offensively, but I think that's the best I've seen this team look defensively, and that's a scary thought for the rest of the league. If the Warriors are kind of turning the corner and improving defensively, then they're going to be really, really tough to beat in the playoffs. If the Spurs can't do it, I'm not sure who can. It's going to be interesting, though, as they kind of get Kevin Durant back into the lineup and get him acclimated, because one thing we've seen is that Steph Curry is kind of going back to playing, the MVP level ball that we saw from him, where he's pulling up, and taking a ton of shots and making a ton of shots. Klay Thompson's more involved offensively. Andre Iguodala has stepped up big time on both ends of the floor. So I'm curious whenever Durant comes back, how things, how they adjust and how things go. But fortunately, Durant's a guy that's unselfish and wants to do what's best for the team. And certainly you never really are hurt when you add a top 3, top 5 player to your squad. So this team is just so talented. Even without Durant, I think they're probably the favorite to win it all. With Durant, they're the overwhelming favorite. So like you said, it's kind of unfortunate. We were all hoping for a competitive series, but I'm not sure we're going to get that in the Western Conference or maybe even the NBA Finals with the way Cleveland's been looking, as you mentioned.
Alex Kennedy on Fridays. We talk NBA here. The playoffs are coming. Looking forward to that. And we'll be all over them here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Plus, you'll hear the NBA playoffs exclusively on 97.3. Alex, have a great weekend, pal.
Thanks a lot. You too. Take care, guys.